Good evening. Hope you're all doing well. Today we're learning Maseches Nedarim Daf Nun Hey, our third in a row of our Reb Meir Shapiro. Is it Nun Hey? Yes, Nun Hey. I think
I didn't have my Gemara lesson.
That's true. Good. That's true. So we're continuing on our theme. What happens if you make a neder in one space? And the neder, does it have applicability in other similar spaces? The Mishnah opens at the top of the page. Hanoder mina dagan. If a person makes a neder against eating grain, what do we typically know? What do we typically know about grain? When we hear grain, we think barley, rye, oat, wheat, and spelt. The 5 grains that leaven, the ones that are kosher for Pesach if they're made the right way, and the other ones are all going to be mizonos, whatever it is. But here that's what we would have assumed. Yet the Gemara is more expansive here. The Mishnah writes it's not only with regular grains. Rather, says the Tanakama, which is Reb Meir, Aser bepol hamitzri yavesh divrei Reb Meir. Even certain beans would be included in here. We'll see why in the Gemara. The Chachamim omrim no, eino oser ela bechameshes haminin. So the question here is, what is intended by the phrase dagan? Does dagan mean something, as we will soon see, that gets piled up when it's being harvested, or no, does it only mean dagan in a more literal sense, the chameshes mine dagan? So that's machlokes number 1. The Mishnah then continues, Reb Meir omer hanoder mina tvua, because Reb Meir didn't have a way to only limit dagan so far, to only limit the chameshes mine dagan. He had a different shita. So how does he say dagan? Only the 5 grains, that's mina tvua. If you say mina tvua, that language is eno oser ela chameshes mi chameshes haminin. Aval hanoder mina dagan oser bakol. But dagan is much more of a broad language than the chameshes mine dagan. Of course, if a person says that they're not going to eat dagan, by definition, they can eat fruits of the tree and vegetables, no problem at all.
Isn't food a catch-all for everything that goes from the ground?
That's a great question. That's one of the Gemara's questions, but it's based on a pasuk, not only based on Svarim. But it's a great question, yes. But you can see clearly from the Mishnah that it looks the reverse. That dagan seems super broad according to Reb Meir, and tvua seems super narrow. Barley, rye, wheat, and spelt. Our Mishnah doesn't speak about quinoa. Is quinoa these are nafkaminas l'maisa? Is quinoa a vegetable? It's bori priadama. Is quinoa mizonos? Is it a grain? Rice is the only one that lives in the twilight. What? That's gonna go in my new restaurant. What did we call it last night? Lav bar inish. Lav bar inish. Quinoa. Rice lives in the gray. Rice is the only food that's mizonos on the front end and bori nefashos on the other. We don't really have other exceptions for that. So that's the end of the Mishnah. The Gemara is now bothered by Shitas Reb Meir, because Reb Meir had tried to have it both ways. He called it dagan and said that it's broader than the chameshes mine dagan. So right as the Gemara opens 6-7 lines down on Nun-Hey, the Gemara says the Memra, what's implied from the Shita of Rav Meir is the dagan kol de midgan mashma. What Rav Meir must have meant with the word dagan is that when I make a neder about the word dagan, it must mean pshat in dagan, which means to make a pile. It doesn't just mean grain; it also means to make a pile. De midgan, anything that's piled up. That's the implication of shitas Rav Meir. It does explain shitas Rav Meir a little bit better because the word midgan means to make a pile, and therefore we can understand why he was more expansive than just grain. Yes, of course you do that to wheat, to barley, rye, oat, wheat, and spelt. By the way, browse is the acronym to remember the 5 grains that are kosher for matzah, barley, rye, oat, wheat, and spelt. Okay, let's continue. The Gemara asks a question. Hold on one second. Masi Rav Yosef. Rav Yosef says, hang on one second. We have a pasuk that's in Sefer Divrei Hayam and Beis, and it's a pasuk about coming back to Eretz Yisrael. Uchifrot hadavar, when it became well known that they wanted to start collecting truma. Hirbu b'nei Yisrael reshis dagan tirosh v'yitzar, grains and wine and olives, and then the pasuk adds in v'chol tuas asad lerov v'gomer. So says the Gemara, v'yamris dagan called the midgan mashma. If really the word dagan implies more broadly, like Rav Meir wanted to say, that's anything that's midgan, anything that's piled up. What then is the end of the pasuk? And there should be a text change here. It shouldn't say kifrot hadavar hirbu. It should say v'chol tuas sadeh. Why does it say v'chol tuas sadeh after it says dagan? Rav Meir, you tried to say that dagan doesn't mean chameshes mine dagan. It means anything that's put in a pile. But this pasuk first says dagan, and then it says v'chol tuas hasadeh. So which one is it? Does dagan mean what you say it means, or does the pasuk win? So the Gemara says, no, Amar Abai la'asuye peros ha'ilan v'yarak. No, he was that v'chol tuas hasadeh was coming to add in other things. It wasn't coming to add in other things that are piled or not piled. It's coming to talk about things that are outside of the camp of dagan altogether, which is fruits and vegetables. That brings us to the first two dots, and the Gemara says, Rav Meir Omer Hanoder Min Tvua. We had said this line of Rav Meir in our Mishnah, that Rav Meir says Dagan is very broad, and Tvua only talks about the Chameshes Mine Dagan. So the Gemara says, Omer Rav Yochanan, and he takes Rav Meir's line and just kicks it up a notch, and he says, Hakol Modim Benoder Min Tvua She'ein Aser El Mechameshes Haminin. So everybody knows, and by everybody knows, I mean none of us knew, that if you say Hanoder Min Tvua, that means you cannot eat barley, rye, oat, wheat, and spelt. In fact, halacha l'maisa, before this last 10 seconds, if one of us would have said, I make a neder, that, and they say that they're never going to eat tvua again, guaranteed we'd be allowed to eat grain. Because you know what we're thinking about? Some big machine that's in southern Illinois harvesting soybeans. We don't think about crops the way they thought about crops. And that's a big yesod that we're going to see in the next Mishnah on this page, on the next page somewhere, the end of this Mishnah. Yeah, at the end of soon. And what we're going to see is that it's all about context. It's all about your understanding of where you are, what's normal in your locale. That is going to be the only way that we'll have clarity on what a person means. So
how could you be no there on that? Because then, for example, you're going to miss out on matzah. Isn't it a mitzvah say to eat matzah?
Very good. So we asked this question also. What about a husband who says he osters his wife?
Okay.
So we spoke about this then. Who remembers the answer? Anybody know? It's indirect. What? You don't get whipped? No.
Isn't that a masna mashakasav?
That's what the Gemara says. Masna mashakasav tzar. How can you do that?
Ready for Daf Yomi.
He's ahead of the curve. He's because he went to YTT. We were just talking about it. I went to the Torah. So he knows Masna mashakasav the Torah. So the Gemara said over there, he wasn't saying to his wife, I'm not going to fulfill the mitzvah of Ona. He's saying, I'm aser with this Hana. And it's one step removed from being Masna Mashakasu B'Torah. And that's how we get around all of these issues. It's just a simple, you're right. But because it's indirect, it doesn't violate the rules of Masna Mashakasu B'Torah. You're still not going to fulfill it. And that's a problem. It's a problem for you. But it's not a halachic issue of Masna Mashakasu B'Torah. Let's say a person says, I will never benefit from leather. But your tefillin are leather. It's indirect. You're not saying I don't want to do the mitzvah of tefillin. You're saying I don't want to wear leather. Or that, right there. Hold on, I got to catch up to you. Which Abaye? This Abaye?
No, that's fine.
Oh,
You don't know?
remember yesterday's stuff. Okay, Abaye and Tazayin, go ahead.
It implies that a buyer holds this is the harness name, but no, but
It wasn't my fault.
Yeah, we're going to learn about leather in a little bit, but not really in regards to mitzvahs. But that's going to be a mission on the Yavud Beit.
Basis to get the nether, whatever the word is.
To be shoal and neder.
Yeah.
What? That there's a mitzvah involved?
Right now. That
Only if your perspective was, had only I known that it would have undone my capacity. If only I had known is the loophole of being shoal and neder. If only I had known, then you're done. And we had a machlokes, you need dayan or not dayan, you do it by yourself. We discussed that already. Don't remember the conclusion, but that's what we discussed. The Gemara says we have a raya for Shitas Rav Yochanan that anyone who says Tvua means Chameshes Minei Dagan Tanya Amihachi, third of the way down. Vishavin, it should be above there. Vishavin bin Noder Min Tvua Shein Oser Ela Mehe Hamin. It says the Gemara. Thank you very much, Rav Yochanan. Yasher koach. We have everybody agrees with you. We know that Pshita. Says the Gemara. No, Mahu Detema Tvua Kol Mile Mashma. You might have thought that the word Tvua is an all-inclusive terminology, and what the Rishonim here add is that the word that Unclus uses for tvua is alalta, and alalta is apparently, it's basically a prophet. So the word means to all the prophets, all the shvach. So then, kamash malan, no. To lo mashma kol mili. The word tvua itself does not mean that much. It doesn't mean, it's a limited word, not an expansive word. Masiv Rav Yosef, it can't be that tvua is a limited word, because it says, Masiv Rav Yosef, v'chifrot sadavar hirbu b'nei Yisrael, and in that pasuk it said, v'chol tuas asad. V'chol tuas asad is a very broad language. So the Gemara says, Amar Rava, tvua l'chud and tuas sada l'chud. The words are different. If you use tvua by itself, it means chameshes minei dagan. If you use tuas asada, that's a bit of a broader language. Okay, story time. 5 lines before the wide lines. Bar Mar Shmuel. Pakid, he got Rashi says here, the Mefarish says Pakid, 2/3 of the way down. Tziva b'tzava also. He put in his tzava, in his will, to Leis Nun, he would give Tleisar Alfe Zuze, 13,000 zuz, the Rava, min alalta dinahar panya. He would give Rava, oh, that's a lot of money. And where was the money coming from? Min alalta, from the shevach, from the proceeds of dinahar panya, which is a location. So that's where he was supposed to get from that estate. Shalcha Rava lekame de Rav Yosef. Rava, 4th century Amor, looks back to Rav Yosef. Rav Yosef was the Rebbe of Abaye, and Rava still asked him shilos. Everybody knew each other. They were all friends. And here the Gemara says that he went to Rav Yosef or sent him a letter and Shalcha lekame. He says to Rav Yosef, Alalta hechin mikarya. What's the scope and parameters of Alalta? Now, this is important because we were just discussing tvua, and we said tvua is a little bit of a limited word. Alalta means shvach, all the proceeds. So is that a larger word or is that a smaller terminology? Amar Rav Yosef mas nisan he says to Rava, you're slacking. This is a basic Mishnah. You should know this, Rava. The Mishnah says, V'shavin menoder min hatvua shein aser ela mechamesh haminin. You only get to benefit from the estate as it relates to chamesh haminin. And Amar le Abaye, wait 1 second. Remember who Abaye is, a Talmud of Rabbi Yosef, right? So now Abaye and Rav are basically sitting in front of Rabbi Yosef now. It's not literally sitting in front because Rava sent a letter. So Rava sent a letter and Abaye is dialoguing with his Rebbe. He says, why would you answer that to Rava? That's not me dummy. How could they even be comparable? Tvua, lo mashma mechameshes haminin. That's very narrow. And alalta is kol mili mashma. Alalta is very broad. So how can you respond to Rava who wants to know what alalta is? That alalta is chameshes mina dagan. That's not true. Alalta is kol mili mashma. So it says the Gemara, Hadru l'kamid Rava. They brought the answer in front of Rava. And then Rava's like, no. Hello, kami baili. That wasn't my question. The alalta kol mili mashma. Everybody knows kol mili is mashma. Everybody knows that. Then alalta is a broader terminology. Hadahu de'i baili. Really, I had a different question. The question he wrote in was the question he responded to. But it wasn't really the question that was bothering Rava. What was really bothering Rava? 2/3 of the way down, 3 lines into the wide lines. Remember, alalta is shvach, and I'm allowed to benefit from the proceeds from shvach that this person owned that he put into his tzava. So, what about the rent that comes in from tenants? Schar batim is schar sfinos. They used to rent out. Soon we're going to have like Uber boats, right? So now we have Uber cars, and you have Airbnb. We rent people's homes. What about the proceeds there? So what's the havamina? Why wouldn't those proceeds count? Says the Gemara, do we say miyam rinan kevan de pachsan, because there's with wear and tear, when I use something of yours, there's a wear and tear, therefore lav alalto, it's not pure proceeds, and therefore that's not money I'm allowed to take as part of the alalta. O dilma, or perhaps kevan de lo yadia pachsayu, because we can't really measure the wear and tear, right? So we just had to do some work in my bathroom. My shower handle turned off, and then all of a sudden it started spinning around, and so I couldn't even turn the water back on if I tried. I had to hire a plumber. Wear and tear. It's not any one use of the handle. It's the market. You never know. I guess yes, everyone. But it's not measurable. You don't know when it's going to break. So it says the Gemara, maybe, perhaps, because we don't know the reduction in wear and tear of one person's use. Maybe that's considered alalta. Alalta is profits. It can't be a profit minus reduction. It has to be profit. So maybe we still consider that. So that was really the question that was bothering Rava. Now, when Rav Yosef heard about that, Amru Rabbanan Kamed Rav Yosef, they said to Rav Yosef, the letter that Rava sent you. That wasn't his question. He really had a different question. So Amar, if he doesn't need me, don't waste my time. I'm a busy posting. I've got a functioning yeshiva. Leave me be. And it says the Gemara, Ikped Rav Yosef. Rav Yosef was upset. Wow, don't waste my time. It should make us think twice when we ask a shiur to the Rav. We should be a little bit more. Okay, so Shama Rava. Rava heard that Rav Yosef was upset. And again, this is he was a Talmud generation. This is the Rav generation. So he went over to him. He went over on Erev Yom Kippur. And he wanted to ask for Mechila for what happened. So the Gemara says, Ashkechei l'shamei, when Rava walked into Rav Yosef's house or into the yeshiva, doesn't say where, he saw his servant to have a kamazig kamei kasa de chamra. He was diluting a cup of wine for him. Of course, we know historically that their wine was extremely strong, and they would dilute it. There are shilos and poskim. What's over diluting to the point that you go from borei pri hagafen to shahakol, dalad kostos to not dalad kostos, Shabbos b'chule. These are good shilos and poskim. But the Gemara says that Rava saw that the shamash was doing this for Rav Yosef. Amar le, he says, Havli de amzig le'ana. Please let me do the miziga. Let me do the dilution. I'm good at this, and let me be. So the shamash is like, okay, do your thing. Yohavle, the servant gave to Rava, he gave him the wine and gave him the water. The kamazik ihu kasa de chamra. And then Rava did the miziga. Ki kashasi, when Rav Yosef picked it up, borei pri hagafen, he takes a sip. Reminder, Rav Yosef is blind. He said, genius. Amar, hadein mizga dami, le mizga de Rava brei de Rav Yosef archama. This exact ratio of dilution tastes like the dilution of Rava. And by the way, now if you take 100 bottles of wine, or take 10 bottles of wine ranging from $50 to $50,000, the average consumer could not tell the difference.
And this show they would know.
For bourbon, for tequila, they would know. For tequila, but they would not know as it relates to wine. I'm not macabre. Not macabre.
Just fancy people.
Yeah, a bunch of fine schmeckers. That's what we all are. That's right. So as the Gemara says that Rav Yosef had mamish, he had a palate. He was able to distinguish. Omar Lei. So after Rav Yosef called out and said, "Wow, this tastes like Rabbi," he says, "Hu nihu, you're exactly right. It's him." Really saying it's me, but he was just speaking, a little bit respectfully. Omar Lei, Rav Yosef pipes up and he says, "Lo tesi vakarach, you cannot sit down. Da'amrsli perusha dehadein milsa, until you answer the following question for me." P.S. We never go back to the question at hand. He never asked for mechila in this story. We never go back to the question that he asked ever. Just different story now. So I in Sham be'ein Yaakov, go look in the Mar Mekomas. It's very strange.
In fact, he spoke to him and learned. He didn't say he's out.
Yeah, but he didn't tell you. You have to ask for mechila. Maybe that's a diuk that mechila can be implied. Yeah, it's a strange story. Yeah. Benjamin?
It was Erev Yom Kippur.
Correct. It was Erev Yom Kippur. He went to ask mechila. I mean, that's the implication of the Gemara, at least. That's okay. So the Gemara says, what was the question he asked him? My dichsiv, what does the pasuk mean when it says midbar matana nachaliel nachaliel bamos? Now, when we learn these psukim, we're like, cool, they traveled, right? That's not what the Tanoim and Amoraim saw. Amar Lei, Rava says back to Rabbi Yosef, this is so beautiful. Kevan she'ose adam es atzmo kim midbar shehu mufkar lakol. Once a person makes themselves like a desert, which anyone is able to trample upon. Look at the Mefarish. Second to last line, and now onto the last line. Melamed Torah bechinam lakol. A person who is willing to teach Torah selflessly to others for free. Then Torah nitna lo b'matana. Then he gets the gift of Torah. Now it's interesting because you first have to teach Torah selflessly to get the gift of Torah, which means that there's levels that you can gain access to. There's the Pashat level, which is learning a Daf Gemara. I didn't understand it before, and I understand it now. And then there's the Matana level, which is whoa, you're getting a gift. It's a whole nother ballgame. And then that's how do we know that the Torah is nitna lo b'matana? Shene'emar umi midbar matana. Once you make yourself a midbar, then you get the matana. V'chevan shenisna lo b'matana. Once you get this as a gift, nachalukel shene'emar mi matana nachaliel. That you're going to be getting this Yerusha from a Kodesh Baruch Hu. Fine. V'chevan shenachalukel ola legdula. Once you get there, again, these are rungs of Torah. Once you get there, then you will access greatness. Shene'emar mi nachaliel bamos, and a bama is a raised platform. If you were the one who raised yourself up and it wasn't a Kodesh Baruch Hu, then a Kodesh Baruch Hu mashpilo. You become a balgai, but Kodesh Baruch Hu will pull the carpet out from under you and bring you back down to where you belong. From the high places to the low places. Not only that, but if a person does elevate themselves, Ella sheshokin osabekarka, they get lowered into the ground. And the word v'nishkafa means that they looked out. And the Rishonim here, right? If you look at the Mefarish, the last one on the page, it says kimo hamashkof. A mashkof is a lentil. That's actually not in the ground. And if you look at the Hagos Habach and Os Katan Vav over there, he writes that the word is the wrong word. And it really should be kamo hashakuf, that which is barely seen. It's something that is in the ground. And that's what happens if a person doesn't, if they raise themselves up on their own. But if a person does tshuva, don't worry. HaKadosh Baruch Hu magbio, turning to the top of Daf Nun Hey Amud Beis, HaKadosh Baruch Hu will bring you back to where you are. Shneimar kol geyina, say that everyone from the low places will then be elevated yet again. End of story. Again, a lot of question marks. Many years ago, I used to sit in the shiur of Beryl Gershenfeld, and he used to show us an Agadata. He'd ask us to read it, just Pashat Pshat, read it. And he would throw 20 questions at it that made no sense. Logical cup questions, not like, it was Gevaldik. And then he would pull out this Maharal and just everything was poetry. By the time he was done, Masok Midvash. I still have notes from it. Unbelievable how he taught about it. It was great. It was great. He's in Eretz Yisrael. What's the name of that? Machon Yaakov, Machon Shlomo. He's part of that institution. Oh yeah, he's a big Bucky and oh really? Really? Wow, he's very special. He's very special. Yeah. Yeah. Good. We're back in the Gemara. We're coming back to a brisa now that is actually related to what we were talking about at the start of the day. Tanya, the brisa writes, top line, Nun Hey Amud Beis, the brisa writes, Hanoder mina dagan. If a person makes a neder upon themselves about dagan, then aser apapol mitzri yavesh. There are some things that are broadly included. This is shitas Reb Meir, like we saw in our Mishnah. But umutter belach, you can eat those beans if they're moist. Umutter beorez, with rice. That's very, very important line in the Gemara. Rice is mutter if you say dagan. What does that tell us? It's not a grain. That's a very important line, because if you are, even if you're Ashkenazi, leisman depalig, it's not an isser deraisa, but the Sephardim mamish eat it. Yeah. You know we're not talking about him right now, right?
No, so Ashko says that, so he says that it's very good to Malta.
With Orez? Yeah, we had this discussion in Pesachim.
It would be considered.
I mean,
So
We don't paskin that way for sure.
Ashko mentioned that she can make the message that. So yes, so we don't want to.
Mm-hmm.
So, but our school brings to the student collectors that the that this is not that basically is not a point for me. So
Certainly not, right?
I just thought that was-
Yeah, certainly a contrast. Machlokes and the Tanaim for sure. But here it's crystal clear. We're talking about an Isser Malkos if you violate your neder. The Gemara is painting a perfectly clear picture. Rice is not grain, at least according to Shitas Reb Meir. Umutter be'orez, be'chilka, be'targis, uvetisni. These three words are references to kernels of wheat that are broken up in either 2s, 3s, or 4s. We learned about this once before in Shas. Don't remember where, but that's what he's talking about over here. All that's mutter. What? Of course. Hanoder min peres hashana. If a person says, I'm not going to eat the fruits of this year, the Gemara says, Aser b'chol peres hashana. You're not allowed to eat the fruits of that year. Very good. But we're not speaking homiletically about the fruits of animals, meaning babies or the products of animals. Therefore, umuter begedim, uvetzlaim, uvechalav, uvebeitzim, uvegozlos. You're allowed to eat all of these animals, their milk, eggs. Vegozlos are birds, no problem. V'im amar, if you said a broader language, gidule shana alai, anything that grows this year, I will therefore restrict upon myself, then aser b'chulan. Next, 8 lines down. Hanoder mina peres haaretz, mean peres haaretz. If a person takes a restriction of the fruits of the land, aser b'chol peres haaretz, umuter b'chemen uvepitrios. So there, the Gemara says these are peres haaretz. You're not allowed to eat regular peres, but you are allowed to eat chemen uvepitrios. These are truffles and mushrooms. Mushrooms probably a little bit more applicable than truffles. But the Gemara seems to say two things. It seems to say that pitrios are peres haaretz, and it also seems to say that they don't fall under the neder of hanoder min peres haaretz. If you said anything that grows from the ground at all, then aser b'chulan. Asks the Gemara, and this is important because the bracha on mushrooms is shahakol, so we have to figure out exactly how this works. Uraminhi, we have a brisa. The brisa reads, Al davar she'en gidulo min hakarka omer shahakol niyabid varo. On something that doesn't grow from the ground, the bracha shahakol. And the brisa, on that brisa, Vitanya, al hamelech ve'al hazamis, if you have salt or if you have salt water, ve'al kemeinu pitrios, on truffles and mushrooms, omer shahakol niyabid varo, stira. How can you tell me that it's considered to be peros min haaretz if they're mushrooms? Yet over here we see that they're shahakol. Amar Abaye, mirba rabu me'ara. They in fact do grow on the ground. But menak, where do they nurse from? Namely, where do they get their nutrients from? Menak me'avira yanki velo me'ara. So yes, they physically are placed on the ground, but they get their nutrients from the air surrounding and not from the ground itself. Namely, there's no roots of mushrooms in the ground. They just grow on their own. Says the Gemara, wait 1 second. It's nice that you're saying that. Vaktani al davar she'en gidula min haaretz. You said it's en gidula min haaretz. So it says the Gemara, you're right. We have to change the language of this brisa. To me, it should say al davar she'en yonek min haaretz, because it's not yonek from the ground. A little bit more of a specific language. The Maisa, mushrooms are shahakol. That's how we paskin, even though they are vegetation of some kind, because they're yonek, they're menak me avira yanke. New Mishnah, halfway down. Hanoder midaksus. A person says they're not going to wear clothes. So mutter bisak, they can wear sackcloth, uviyaria, they can wear sheets, uvechamila, some type of garment. All of that is considered permissible. The Mefarish says that chamila is ke'ein uria. It's something similar to a sheet. So it's hard for us to translate because, as is always the case with Nedarim, the language is very hard for us. Amar, if a person says, konam tzemer ole alai, I hereby restrict wool from being upon me, mutter lihis kasos begizet tzemer, you're allowed to still cover yourself with pieces of wool. Okay, you can't put on a wool suit, but you could take on a little bit of fabric and put it on you. If a person says that pishtan ola alai, flax, I'm not going to have that upon me. There too, motor lihiskasos be'anite pishtan. You can take strips of flax. You just can't wear a garment made out of flax. Rabbi Yehuda Omer, and this is a big klal, hakol lefi hanoder. Everything is dependent upon what the noder says. If I'm the one making a neder, it depends what comes out of my mouth, coupled with what my intentions are. Ta'an v'hizia. Let's say I'm carrying something and it's making me sweat. Or I'm carrying something that smells bad. Omar, konam tsemeru pishtim ole alai. I hereby make a neder against tsemeru pishtim. Did I mean I wasn't going to wear them ever? No, it just meant I didn't want to carry them anymore. They make me sweat and it smells bad. Therefore, motor lihiskasos v'asar lahafshil achora. What he meant is, there's nothing wrong with wearing the suit, but I'm not allowed to then carry it again because I made a neder against semer and pishtim to carry them. I'm not doing it. It smells bad. So you have to listen to what's going on. Look at the context. Obviously, he's not making a neder against his clothing. He doesn't want to carry this kind of stuff anymore. So it's hakol lefi hanoder. Tanya the Brisa writes, 2/3, 3/4 of the way down. Hanoder min aksus, similar Brisa to our Mishnah. Someone who makes a restriction on clothing, mutter besaku v'yariv v'chamila, just like our Mishnah, you're allowed to wear sackcloth, sheets, and chamila is another type of garment similar to sheets. V'aser b'pundu b'paskia, those two are kind of belts. Uvi skurtia, we'll see what that means in a minute. Uvikatabalia, v'anpilia, uplina, umichnasayim, v'kova. All of these types of garments, leather garments, hats and pants, and michnasayim and kova is a hat. Says Gemara, "My iskorti, Amar Rabba Bar Barchana kituna ditzila." This is a leather shirt. That is a look. That is just. I wasn't judging it.
Like 2022 look of the year.
You think so?
You should look at your year in review. I'm saying that's what I've been wearing all year.
Wow. Says the Gemara, Tanya, the Brisa writes, Yotzin bisak ava uvisagus ava uviyariv v'chamila b'bnei agshamim. On Shabbos, it didn't Shabbos. This is a Tosefta or Maseches Shabbos. You are allowed to go out wearing sackcloth, or sagus is another type of sackcloth that are thick, and with a sheet, and with this garment that's similar to the sheet. B'bnei agshamim. What would be the equivalent? You can wear a poncho. You're allowed to wear things that are specific to rain. However, aval lo b'teba, you can't go out wearing a box over your head. V'lo b'kupa, another type of shape. V'lo b'machatzeles, you can't wear a mat over your head. Mipnei agshamim, that's not allowed. So Poskim asked this question: are you allowed to wear a baseball hat on Shabbos? If the hat has a brim that's a tefach, so is that a siyas ohel midrabanan on Shabbos? Even though it's temporary, and even though that wasn't purely your intent, can you wear your Shabbos hat? The new brims are smaller than a tefach. The smaller, some brims are, yeah, absolutely. So these are interesting questions. And what they can't no, but if you're wearing a hat because it's your hat and you didn't wear it because of the rain, that's not opening an umbrella. But if you're wearing your own hat home, you're not wearing it for that purpose. You're wearing, unless you are, you have to know yourself. But I remember many years ago hearing in some kollel I was standing and they were discussing, can you take a baseball hat and wear it on Shabbos? I don't know how we pass. I presume it's mutter. I don't know. What? Beautiful. What is that? Siana?
Siana is the cover show.
So it's a hat.
I'm saying it's still
Yeah, beautiful. I remember us talking about it once at some point. But at that point, if it's in Maseches Shabbos, it was from my dining room in the middle of COVID. All of that's PTSD to start with. So, okay. Lastly, Haroim Yotzim Bisakim, the people who are shepherds, they are allowed to go out with Sakim. And says the Gemara, what's with the Rom? V'lo Rom Biladam Ru Ela Kol Adam El Shadibru Chachamim Behovet. Just that was a common thing that people had to go out for. Last sugi of the night, Rabbi Yehuda Omer Hakol Lefi Hanoder. Let's give another example of following the content and context of the Noder. Tanya, Ketzad Amar Rabbi Yehuda Hakol Lefi Hanoder. What does Rabbi Yehuda mean when he says that we follow what the Noder says? Haylavush Semer V'Hatzer. If a person is wearing wool and it's difficult, it's uncomfortable for him, says the Gemara V'Amar, and he says in that moment of discomfort, Konam Semer Ole Alai. So says the Gemara, Aser Lilbo Shumoter Lito. Because what was he complaining about? Wearing leather. So if you're wearing leather and it starts to rain and you start to smell, and because wet wool doesn't smell good, you call out in frustration, I'm making a neder on myself not to wear this material again. It says the Gemara, that's only about clothing. Therefore, says the Gemara, asur lilbosh u'mutar liton. And lastly, hayaton pishtan v'hizia. If a person's carrying flax and he starts to sweat, and then v'amar konam pishtam alai, ola alai, and I don't want to wear pishtan again. Obviously, mutar lilbosh v'asur liton, because it's all about context, and he was sweating, and it was heavy. And because he was carrying flax, that's what became asur. We'll stop right here. We'll pick up Mir Hashem tomorrow night with Daf Nun Vav. Wishing you all a beautiful night. Yeah.